case accusing the Trump of the tropics, who's been accused of orchestrating a plot to remain in power even after he lost his 2022 re-election bid. But let's, of course, start with what is happening in the United States of America, whereas the 2026 US midterm elections are approaching next year. President Donald Trump's every move is under growing scrutiny. From approval ratings to public views on many of his key policy issues, polls are starting to reflect as to what Americans actually think and feel about his leadership over the course of the last 8 months. Now, according to the latest survey that was conducted by the Harvard Capps Harris poll, the Americans apparently don't have a very positive opinion of Trump's presidency so far. Now, nearly half of the respondents said that the United States is apparently not on the right track. 53% said that Trump is leading the economy in the wrong way. Inflation has dethroned illegal immigration as the top issue for the Americans. Meanwhile, 55% of the participants believe that Trump's tariffs are harmful to the American economy. Now, Trump's overall approval ratings are also on a steady decline. 47.3% of the Americans are apparently not satisfied with Trump's overall performance as president. His approval ratings now stand at about 44.7%. Now, Trump has intensified his so-called crime crackdown in recent months. He has deployed the National Guard troops in the U.S. Capitol and is mulling to repeat the same in several other high-profile American cities. Now, according to the Emerson College poll, 48% of the Americans say that they don't agree with Donald Trump's move. That is 4% more than the people who support this decision. On the political front, Trump is pushing the Republican states to carry out what is effectively partisan map redrawing. The move aims to help the Republicans win more seats in upcoming midterm elections when the control of the House will be on stake. Now, this has triggered a domino effect across the United States, with the Democrat-ruled states also now announcing some tit-for-tat map redrawing. Now, partisan gerrymandering also lacks support on the ground. In California, more than 53% of the respondents believe that it's a bad idea. In the Republican-ruled Texas, the public sentiment remains the same, with more than 56% of the people saying that it is a bad idea. Now, all this political tug-of-war is aimed at a decisive victory in the 2026 midterm elections. But according to the polls, the race remains near the tie between the blue and the red camp. And the voter support is split at 43% mark, with 13% of the voters still undecided. From tariffs to remapping borders and National Guard troops being deployed to quell crime, Trump aims to win the first referendum of the 2026 midterms. But with the race being as close as it is, the control of the House seems like a pretty tough game in the days ahead. All right, now to give us more details in terms of what's in fact playing out about Donald Trump's approval ratings of his performance in the course of the last 8 months, we're joined by our correspondent Susan Tehrani, who's joining us live from New York. Susan, so these are opinion polls which are giving us the mood of the nation in America. Give us a sense, some of the key issues of Donald Trump, such as his tariff war, such as his strident anti-immigration rhetoric and the actions that he's followed through with. Are these the main issues that the American people want the president to be focused on, or is he losing sight of other key issues such as the cost of living and inflation, where the Americans perhaps want their president to be more focused on?
It was a very interesting poll, and what I found interesting is still the top of voters' minds, 33%, is the economy, followed by the threat to democracy, which is 24%, immigration and healthcare, immigration at 12%, and healthcare at 9%. What was fascinating about this poll was that while Americans are almost equally divided about deploying National Guard troops to cities to fight crime, for the most part, it appears that Americans aren't dismissive of that. They're opposed to deploying National Guards to different cities, more than 19 cities, to help ICE agents on immigration crackdown. So it's very nuanced. While you see immigration is still on top of voters' mind, how these policies are implemented is where you see a very wide distinction that they do want immigration crackdown, they want illegals out, they want border security, but they think that deploying National Guard troops to help immigration and ICE agents is a step too far. But they don't see it that way for National Guards to be deployed. They're very divided to fight crime. Of course, the issue of tariffs is on everyone's mind. This is more something that is being foreseen as opposed to really implemented in everyone's daily lives. There is a growing concern that these tariffs are ultimately going to catch up, notably as the Christmas holiday season is just a few months away. That hasn't happened yet, but you can see that the sentiment is there among the American public. Nonetheless, the issue of inflation is also on everyone's mind, despite the fact that inflation is significantly lower than, for example, 2022. Perception matters. Again, it's tied to the tariffs. There is this wide concern that everyday commodities are just going to get more expensive because of these tariff policies, something the Trump administration has to keep an eye on.
Very interesting. Thank you very much, Susan Tehrani, for joining us with all those details there. Now, the American president is lashed out at the US courts. Trump's latest attack on the federal court comes after a ruling that termed his sweeping tariffs to be illegal. Now, there is a legal battle that is currently underway in the United States on the constitutionality and the legality of Donald Trump's executive orders on scores of different issues. Now, Donald Trump, in fact, took to his social media platform Truth Social, accusing the courts of being a radical left and warning that if the tariffs are struck down, then the United States will turn into, in his words, a third world country. Now, last week, the US Appeals Court ruled that Trump had overstepped his authority in imposing the tariffs on nearly every major US trading partner. The judges found that the Congress never intended to give the President of the United States of America unlimited power to impose tariffs. The court ruled that the law Trump used to impose tariffs was actually designed primarily for sanctions and not tariffs. The court has left tariffs in place until the 14th of October, giving the White House time to appeal to the Supreme Court. The loss of the Supreme Court would strike at the heart of Trump's economic policy, potentially forcing the government to repay billions in tariff revenue and undermining deals with the European Union and other partners. For now, though, the clock is ticking. The White House has until the middle of October to decide whether to take this fight to the Supreme Court, a battle that could determine the legitimacy of Donald Trump's tariff war that he's unleashed on the rest of the world.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. We just had a very good session. The lawyers said that there was absolutely nothing.
Now, the fate of Brazil's former president, Jair Bolsonaro, is on thin ice as the landmark coup plot trial enters its final phase. The Brazil Supreme Court has begun verdict deliberations in the case where the 70-year-old Trump of the tropics is accused of orchestrating a plot to remain in power even after he lost his 2022 re-election bid. Now, shortly after the multi-day session began, one of the Brazilian judges considering the verdict stated that the far-right former president had sought to install a dictatorship. Now, these are the images from Brasilia's Three Powers Square, where Brazil's Supreme Court is located. A heavy police presence and security barriers can be seen in place as deliberations into Bolsonaro's coup trial currently remains underway. The Brazilian judge Alexandre de Moraes, who has been sanctioned by the United States in retaliation for the criminal proceedings against Bolsonaro, has said that the court will ignore external pressures when ruling on the coup trial.
If there is evidence beyond reasonable doubt, criminal proceedings will be upheld and the defendants convicted. If there is evidence of innocence or even reasonable doubt about the defendant's guilt, the defendants will be acquitted. This is how justice is done.
Now, the American President Donald Trump has launched a highly and unusual pressure campaign in support of the far-right leader, claiming that Bolsonaro has been unfairly persecuted. Calling the trial a witch hunt, Trump has slapped 50% tariffs on Brazilian exports and has imposed sanctions on several of the Supreme Court justices overseeing the case. The verdicts in Bolsonaro's case and those of the 7 co-defendants, including several former ministers and generals, are expected by the 12th of September. The Bolsonaro risks over 40 years in prison if convicted of conspiring to overturn the 2022 presidential election results, where he suffered a narrow defeat by President Luis Inácio Lula da Silva. The Bolsonaro's trial is a historic first in the country, where a former leader is accused of trying to overturn democracy after his electoral defeat. Now, the case has deeply divided the country between those who are in favor and those who see it as a political showdown. Now, 5 justices are deliberating and a simple majority of 3 is needed for a guilty verdict. The Bolsonaro, for his part, has denied all the charges and claims that he's actually a victim of political persecution. The British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has announced a shake-up of his Downing Street team in a bid to tighten control over his government and also to address a recent dip in the Labour poll numbers. Now, Keir Starmer has roped in Chancellor Rachel Reeves' former deputy from the Treasury to strengthen his Downing Street operation. Now, Darren Jones, until now the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, has been moved to the newly created role as the Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister. The decision to pull a Chief Secretary out of the Treasury and into number 10 is being seen as a major power move by the Prime Minister.
Summer's definitely over, and this morning we've got all the number 10 staff together and talked through what phase 2 of the government is going to look like and feel like. So we go into phase 2, 1st of September 2025, in good spirits, confident and with conviction about what we're doing. It needs a more powerful number 10, so we've added to the team with some really important new members. I made a number of other changes, but this is about focus on delivery, now marching forward to the next phase of government.
Notably, Rachel Reeves' number 2, Darren Jones, has been hired as Keir Starmer's own Chief Secretary, a position that did not exist until now. Now, James Murray will replace Jones as the Treasury Chief Secretary. The former Treasury official Dan York-Smith has been appointed as Starmer's principal private secretary. Now, Starmer has also brought in the former Bank of England Deputy Governor Minouche Shafiq as his new Chief Economic Advisor, a move that will allow him to take greater control of economic policy. The shake-up follows the growing criticism of Reeves, who's been at odds with the Labour leadership, and Reeves faces a difficult period amidst rising speculation that she'll have to announce major tax rises in the budget while she's expected to remain in post. Her authority and also the power of the Treasury will be significantly diluted. In Serbia, tens of thousands of people staged a silent protest in Belgrade demanding for snap elections and calling for accountability after a deadly infrastructure collapse last year. Now, the march commemorated the 16 lives that were lost when the roof of a newly renovated railway station collapsed in Novi Sad last November. Led by high school students, the solemn march began at the old railway station where 16 pupils carried white roses each representing a victim. As the names of the deceased were read aloud, the crowd stood in silence, calling not just for justice, but for political change.
I don't see a solution. The only solution I can see, although I don't know what the outcome will be, is elections. We must go out and vote even under these unequal conditions. They are absolutely unequal. But we must fight in any way we can.
I don't see a solution. The only solution I can see, although I don't know what the outcome will be, is elections. We must go out and vote even under these unequal conditions. They are absolutely unequal. But we must fight in any way we can.
A similar protests took place in cities including in Novi Sad, in Kraljevac and Aleksina. The protesters are demanding for early elections in the hope of unseating the president, Alexander Vučić, and his ruling SNS party. The government has denied any wrongdoing while the protests had remained largely peaceful for many months. clashes erupted on the 13th of August, leaving dozens of civilians and police officers injured. The critics have accused Vucic's administration of suppressing media freedom, maintaining ties to organized crime, and using violence against political opponents. The government has strongly denied such allegations. Now, these agitations date back to early March of this year, when such protests broke out but made headlines for different reasons. In some video footage, the protesters can be seen holding up their lit mobile phones in silence, when suddenly there was a swooshing sound and the crowd started running away in panic. The protesters recounted the horror and described the incident as harrowing. Now, what you just heard caused panic on the 15th of March and had put the Serbian government in the dock. Hundreds of protesters back then had leveled some very serious accusations that the police, the military and the security services had used a sonic weapon to target peaceful protesters. The accusation was shunned immediately by the Serbian government. So let's tell you about the damage caused by a sonic weapon. Now, sonic weapons or sound weapons they use sound waves to incapacitate, disorient, or to harm individuals by harnessing acoustic energy. Now, these devices can emit sounds of up to 160 decibels, which is more than twice of what is considered safe for human ears. Now, such devices cause both physical and psychological effects, such as dizziness, disorientation, or severe headaches. So, as public anger mounts, Serbia finds itself at a political crossroads with the voices of its youth leading the charge for change. Now, the Maratha quota protests in India's state of Maharashtra is all set to end, with the activist Manoj Jiranje, who is leading the protest, announcing victory and saying that the state government has now agreed to his demands. The Maharashtra government has promised to withdraw the cases against the Maratha quota agitation protesters. Earlier in the day, the delegation of state ministers arrived at Azad Maidan for talks with Jiranje. Now, the government presented a draft to address the community's demand for quota, and the panel said that the document had been cleared within the legal framework. As soon as the announcement was made, there were celebrations that erupted in Azad Maidan, where Jiranje has been sitting on a hunger strike since the 29th of August. The court had ordered Jiranje to vacate Azad Maidan by 3 p.m. The deadline was later relaxed, allowing him to stay until Wednesday morning, giving time for the negotiations between the government and the protesters. Now, Manoj Jiranje announced that the protesters will leave Mumbai by tomorrow morning, and the state government had agreed to implement the Hyderabad Gazette, which refers to a 1918 document released by the then Nizam government. The Hyderabad Gazette plays a key role in the ongoing demand for the Maratha reservation in Maharashtra, especially in the context of granting the Kunbi caste status to the community, making them eligible for the quota under the OBC section. The government has promised to issue a resolution document accepting the demands of the protesters. So, as anti-government protests continue to rock Indonesia, the United Nations Human Rights Office spokesperson has called for dialogue to address the public concerns. The spokesperson Ravina Shamdasani said that the United Nations Human Rights Office is closely following the spate of violence in Indonesia in the context of the nationwide demonstrations, while stressing for transparent probe into the alleged violation of human rights.
The authorities must uphold the rights to peaceful assembly and freedom of expression while maintaining order in line with international norms and standards in relation to the policing of public assemblies. All security forces, including the military when deployed in a law enforcement capacity, must comply with the basic principles on the use of force and firearms. We call for prompt, thorough, and transparent investigations into all alleged violations of international human rights law.
While rights groups are saying that 20 people are missing following the deadly protests, hundreds of students clashed with the police again on Monday. While holding rallies and protests, the demonstrators reiterated their demand and said that the parliament should work for the people rather than for party leaders.
The biggest reform we need for Parliament is for them to work for the people, rather than for the party leaders or the parties themselves. That's what reform really means. No matter who you are, it doesn't matter. As long as you only work for your party, you're not working for the people.
The widespread violent protests that began last week have swept across the nation, resulting in 7 deaths. The protests were sparked by public frustration over excessive pay and allowances to the parliamentarians and the growing cost of living in the country. The unrest began in Jakarta and quickly spread to other cities, with clashes between the riot police and the protesters throwing rocks. The demonstrators have also set fire to regional parliament buildings, the police headquarters, and damaged infrastructure while looting and also burning vehicles. In response, Subianto has ordered for security forces to take firm action against the protests. All right, let's also now take a quick look at some of the other political stories that are making headlines across the globe. The France's far-right National Rally leaders say that they are preparing for the possibility of snap elections in the country following their meeting with Prime Minister François Bayrou, who now faces a vote of no confidence. Bayrou is holding talks this week with leaders across the spectrum. Opposition parties have said that they'll bring down the minority government in a September 8th confidence vote. Thailand's Pheu Thai party moves to dissolve the parliament. This is the country's main opposition party, has not yet decided whether to back any of the two coalitions. And according to a media report and party sources, a decision to dissolve the parliament has been taken, but it is not confirmed whether the required documents have been submitted to the relevant authorities. The turmoil follows the former Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawtra's dismissal due to ethics violations plunging the economy. A Turkish court has dismissed the main opposition CHP party's leadership, this over alleged irregularities in its 2023 Congress. And according to the ruling, the court has cancelled the outcome of the provincial Congress, throwing out the CHP's Istanbul provincial leader, Özgür Çelik, along with 195 of the party leadership and other delegates. And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of our newscast. Stay tuned to WION.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street
to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets. WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
To bring the benefits of the Subhash Chandra Show to your educational institution, teachers and students, send an invitation to Juhi Jha at juhi@such.org.in.
The stress of our world can take a toll on our physical and emotional health. Here